Good evening, folks. You are very welcome to Bandido Talks live Friday evening, 7 p.m. here on YouTube. Live every Friday, live every Saturday, live every Sunday. We will be here live, folks. It is Friday night, of course, which means it's time for it's time to get our weekend off and rolling. It is indeed Halloween. There are many fireworks going on or going off, exploding, whatever word we want to use. Fireworks are going to be a theme of tonight's show. Not because I'm going to talk about fireworks, but because they are literally exploding outside the house. So you may hear some fireworks in tonight's show. They are going to invade our live stream. But what can I do about invading fireworks? All we can do is get on with our Friday night show. It is, of course, our Let's Reflect show. What do we do on a Friday? We always do a little reflection on our Tuesday upload. This Tuesday, what did we have? We had our Best Bits compilation. The Bandido Talks Best Bits compilation from last week's show, episodes 5 to 7. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to have a little bit of a deeper dive. This is what we do on our Friday live segment. We always have a little bit of a deeper dive into our Tuesday upload, whether it's with a guest, whether it's a Best Bits compilation. Tonight it's a Best Bits compilation. So we're going to dive into this a little bit more tonight. We had, of course, in our little Best Bits uploads, we tend to have 4 different highlights or stories. Now, 3 of those particular stories are going to be relevant to tonight's show. I'm going to get into those in a little bit. Of course, we are on episode 8. Episode 8. We're already at episode 8. The art of the Porky Pie. The art of the Porky Pie. I have a feeling this is going to be a good show tonight, folks. Whenever we're talking about porky pies, you always get that sense that it's going to be a good show. Anyway, before we get into tonight's show, folks, I want to say that if you enjoy our little Friday segment, our Let's Reflect segment, and you think that it warrants a like, feel free to like tonight's live stream. Of course, if you are here live with us, if you're in the live chat, I promise I will periodically check the live chat. I do believe that I missed a comment the last time. I will try to not let that happen again. But if you're in the live chat, feel free to drop a comment, engage with the show, let me know your thoughts about anything that it is we're talking about, or if you just want to drop a random comment. We can deal with randomness on a Friday night. And if you're seeing the episode posted after the live stream has happened, get down into the comments section. There go the fireworks. Right on cue. 3 minutes into tonight's show, and off go the fireworks. Anyway, if you're watching it after the live stream, get down into the comments. Let me know what you thought about the show. And of course, if you think what we are doing here with good old Bandido Talks, if you think it's interesting, what we talk about, if it's valuable, if it's useful in some way, then feel free to subscribe to the channel. Now, with all of that out of the road, let's get straight into tonight's show. The art of the Porky Pie. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with our little Friday segment, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into our Tuesday upload. Tuesday uploads could be one of 2 things. They could be a guest interview, or they could be a Best Bits compilation. This week, we're going to be diving into our Best Bits compilation from Tuesday's upload. Now, for those of you who have not seen our upload on Tuesday, do not leave the live stream. Don't leave the live stream. Remember, you only get live once. You can always go and watch the episode after the live stream. I would encourage you to do that because it essentially summarizes some of our main talking points from last week's shows. But anyway, what I'm going to do is we're going to go down through just a quick recap of our best bits upload that we had on Tuesday past, just so that we can set the scene for anybody who may not have seen that particular upload on Tuesday. So what did we do on Tuesday? What were the stories? What were the talking points in Tuesday's episode? Let's go through them one by one, because 3 of these 4 stories are going to apply to what it is that we are talking about tonight. So story number 1 was the Irish presidential election between, who was it? Heather Humphreys and Catherine Connolly. I think those were the names. So that was our first highlight on our Best Bits compilation, Tuesday's upload. Our second highlight was to do with mansion tax and billion-dollar black holes, or billion-dollar black holes. I'm talking like an American now. Billion-pound black holes in the UK. And of course, Rachel Reeves was considering introducing mansion tax to try and plug this billion-pound black hole. That was our story number 2. Story 3. Now I'm in the right country. The United States. Mr. Gavin Newsom, the Democratic California governor. He was, of course, making a little appearance in our Best Bits compilation, but you wouldn't know it because I was actually talking about crepes in that particular little highlight. Why was I talking about that? Well, because Gavin Newsom in one of our stories was really trying to give us the hard sell that he would just never lie to you folks. Of course, Gavin Newsom may well be running for the White House in 2028. But that was our third story. And then our fourth story was the pseudo-esteem social media trap. Now, the final story will have nothing to do with tonight's show. The pseudo-esteem social media trap, we are not going to talk about that particular highlight from our Best Bits upload. The reason why is because we've already done a very extensive show on that. Episode 5, From Needy to Greedy. If you want to know all you need to know from the Bandido's perspective about the pseudo-esteem social media trap, episode 5, From Needy to Greedy, is the place where you need to go. It is 1 hour and 53 minutes. I'm warning you now in advance. If you have 1 hour and 53 minutes to spare of your time, then From Needy to Greedy episode 5 may be a good place for you to dive in to the idea of the social media pseudo-esteem trap. So we're not going to talk about that. But we're going to talk about our first 3 stories, our first 3 highlights. The Irish presidential election in 2025, mansion tax and billion-pound black holes, and of course, Mr. Gavin Newsom, the Democratic California governor who may be running for presidency in the United States in 2028. He's a high-profile Trump critic, by the way, just in case you didn't know that. The Guardian wanted to remind us. The Guardian news article wanted to remind you all of that, folks. Anyway, those were our stories, and those are the 3 stories that we're going to deal with tonight. Now, why am I doing a little bit of a recap on what it is that we uploaded in Tuesday's video? Well, because, of course, episode 8 tonight, the art of the Porky Pie. Now, last week when I was talking about these particular stories, certainly about a couple of them, I talked about the idea that when people have to use a single word, we could say, to summarize their thoughts, generally, on politicians and politics in general, if we were to do a survey of, let's say 5,000 adults, a survey of 5,000 adults, and we were to ask those 5,000 adults, give me a single word that summarizes your thoughts and feelings towards politicians in general. I speculated that some of the words that may come up in general among the population, some of those words would be deception, manipulation, lying, dishonesty. These were some of the words that come up. I would argue, if we were to survey a whole bunch of people and to generally get them in one word to summarize what they think about modern day politicians. Now, maybe there would be some people would say admiration and things like that. But I think a lot of people would perhaps select the words from the prior category: deception, manipulation, dishonesty, lying. These kinds of words. Now, I am generalizing. As I said last week, I'm sure there are politicians in people's local areas and communities who maybe do very valuable work. They're in touch with the community. They're not in these high positions away from the common folk. So maybe they do something valuable and interesting for the community. So not everything will be negative, but I'm saying in general words would be those in that category that I've just described. Now, why am I saying this? Because when we use words like lying or deception, we have a colloquial term for lie. And that colloquial term is a porky pie. So for those of you who may not be familiar, who may have seen the thumbnail and thought, what the fuck is he talking about, a porky pie? The art of the porky pie. Is this going to be a culinary show tonight? Are we talking about food? We are not talking about food. We are talking about porky pies, but not porky pies as they relate to your stomach and your hunger drive. We're talking about the kind of porky pie that is a synonym for lying or lies. So these are maybe some of the words we could argue that common folk would maybe use to describe politicians and maybe just the general field of politics in general. It's a generalization. There will be, of course, some positivity, as I've already outlined, for certain local politicians who may be doing useful, valuable things for their community. So the first thing that I'm going to say here is it's always interesting when I hear people criticizing politicians, and I'm not saying politicians are beyond criticism, but when I hear people criticizing politicians and using these kinds of words, porky pies, hypocrisy, in my behavior, in my worldview, if I were to criticize politicians for being dishonest and telling porky pies, but I myself am not fully honest and I'm prone to a bit of a porky pie myself, would that be hypocritical? And that's why I think it's always interesting to put the camera back on ourselves. Are we always 100% honest? Because if we are going to, let's say, criticize politicians in this case for being dishonest from time to time, for telling porky pies from time to time, it's always good to check yourself, turn the camera back on yourself. We can even think of this in quite a literal way. If we are talking with a group of friends and we think we are talking among one another, and then let's say one of our friends pulls out their camera. So let's imagine they pull out their phone camera and they start to record the conversation that you're having with your friends. Let's imagine during this conversation that you're having with your friends, let's imagine one of your worldviews. Oh, I don't know. Let's say one of your worldviews is you believe there are 7-foot reptiles who are shapeshifters who transform into humans, rule over governments, and then they turn into 7-foot reptiles again when nobody's looking. Let's say that's your worldview. Let's say that's how you think the world works. It revolves around 7-foot shape-shifting reptiles. Okay. If you are talking about this particular topic with your group of friends, and you're under the illusion that nobody is recording you, or that there's not a camera turned towards you, you may talk freely about it, because you're thinking, I'm with my friends. This is a place for open discourse. However, if somebody were to take out their phone and start recording the conversation, let's say you have some self-awareness, and let's say you are aware of the fact that if the wider public were to find out that you believe there are 7-foot shape-shifting reptiles in charge of the planet, you may feel that if that particular opinion got out into the wider public via, a video recording of what it is that you were saying and it was posted online, you may feel embarrassed. You may feel status loss because you may not want that particular opinion. You may not want people who are not your close friends to know that that's how you believe the world works. Okay, because you may be feeling there's going to be status loss. Maybe Business colleagues who you might have been dealing with may look at such a statement and say, I don't want to associate with someone like that who has such a wacky worldview. Maybe family members might find you weird. Other friends might find you weird. People in public who you associate with in general, maybe at your little local club, your art club, if they find out that you have such a strange worldview, who knows? Who knows? They may start to distance themselves from you because you're a conspiracy theorist. You're going, quote, mad. So you may not want this opinion to get out into public, out into the public space, the wider public space. So if I were to turn the camera on to you and say to you, please continue your discussion with your friends, what you may do is you may tell a porky pie. Why might you tell a porky pie? Because you don't want other people to know that this is actually your worldview. So whenever I would turn the camera on to you, you will, quote, adjust to your circumstances and say, oh, I am being filmed, so therefore I don't want to be honest with people about my true worldview. So you may then tell a porky pie. Somebody may ask you when the camera's on, well, so, Betty, how do you think the world works? Now, in Betty's head, Betty thinks the world is run by 7-foot shape-shifting reptiles. But Betty knows that she doesn't want that general worldview to go out into the public sphere. So what does Betty do? She tells a porky pie there on the spot. She may say, oh, I think the world is run by, oh, I don't know, status-grabbing humans who just want to ascend the dominance hierarchy and, you know, gather as many resources as possible and become as famous as possible and get as much money as possible. Betty may adjust her worldview. But what is she doing? She's lying. It's not really what she thinks. But when the camera is turned on to Betty, she is willing to adjust her worldview. Now, we'll use a term like adjust her worldview. But what's she really doing? To those who would be watching the video footage of that particular discussion, they would think that that is Betty's true worldview. But really, Betty has told a porky pie because the camera has been turned on to Betty. And Betty doesn't want people to know that is what she really thinks about the world. So she lies. She lies to the camera. Sound familiar? Do we think that potentially politicians, other people who, when the camera is turned on to them, can we start to understand perhaps why there may be some deceit, some porky pies that get told? What happens if there's a skeleton in somebody's closet? Are they going to want to reveal this skeleton to the rest of the world? So that's an example, folks. When we're looking at politicians and other public figures, and we ourselves criticize them for being dishonest or telling porky pies, it's always good to check yourself, turn the camera back onto yourself and have a look at your own existence. Are you always 100% honest? You? Do you ever tell little porky pies throughout your daily day? Is this true? Does this happen? Because if it does happen, then I would argue you're a hypocrite. You're criticizing the politician or the person on TV or in the media for being deceitful and lying and telling porky pies, but you do it in your own existence. Now, we wouldn't want to be hypocrites, would we? So, always good to turn the camera back on ourselves to make sure we're not being hypocritical in what it is that we're saying. Which brings me on to something very, very important. Very important. And I'm going to lay this out by saying it is utterly disgraceful that primary education and secondary education does not teach this at school. Think of however you want to think of the educational system. I think it is a disgrace that this has never been taught at school. I can guarantee you, any of you who are watching live, any of you who watch this live stream after it is posted, I guarantee you, you have never learned this at primary school, secondary school, or university. None of those three educational institutions will have taught you this concept. So I'm going to teach you something very, very valuable tonight on episode 8, the art of the porky pie. And this thing that is disgraceful, that has never been taught to anybody at school. I'm sure of it. And you would think mathematics teachers would teach it. You would think science teachers would teach it, because it's the Porky Pie equation. It's made of two parts. Okay? Part number one is, if you are going to tell a porky pie, in other words, if you're going to tell a lie, you must assess the potential benefit that may come from you, or the potential benefit that may come your direction if you tell that lie. And then part number two, you must weigh up the potential cost of you being found out of having told that lie. That is the Porky Pie equation. So the Porky Pie equation, two parts. Part number one, you must assess the potential benefit of you, or the potential benefit that you're going to receive from telling this particular porky pie. And then number two, you must assess the potential cost that could come from you, or from somebody discovering that you have told this porky pie. In other words, it is a cost-benefit analysis. The Porky Pie equation is a cost-benefit analysis. One must first assess what potential benefit is to be gained from telling the lie, or the porky pie. And then number two, one must assess the potential cost or downside that would come from somebody finding out that you have told a porky pie or a lie. A very important equation, the Porky Pie equation. Now, why am I telling you this? Because when anybody tells a porky pie, whether you realize it or not, you are thinking, this person, this hypothetical person who's thinking of telling a lie, is thinking about the Porky Pie equation. The Porky Pie equation requires you to run a cost-benefit analysis. What's the benefit, the potential upside, to me if I tell this lie, and what is the potential cost or downside to somebody finding out that I have been deceitful? So the Porky Pie equation has been a fundamental part of your existence, but you were never taught it. Shame on the educational system. Now, why do I say this? Because when you're going to tell a lie or a porky pie, like those that we could argue in our 3 stories from our Tuesday upload, think about it. We were talking about the Irish presidential election in 2025, number 1. We were then talking about Rachel Reeves trying to fill the £1 billion black hole in the UK by introducing potentially a mansion tax. And of course, Lord Mervyn King, former Bank of England manager, I think, he wasn't happy about this. And then, of course, we have Mr. Gavin Newsom, who may be running for the United States presidency in 2028, the Democratic California governor. So all of these people, all of these stories are related to politics. And we've already outlined that we could argue that if we were to survey people, words that people associate with politicians, whether we like it or not, would be dishonesty, deception, manipulation, porky pies, lying. These are words that I would argue would come up in the discussion, okay, to summarize people's thoughts and feelings towards politicians. So it's important for us to know the Porky Pie equation for this reason. Because if we are going to tell a porky pie, we must understand the cost-benefit analysis involved. In other words, can we tell the porky pie, get the benefit from being deceitful via the porky pie, and do so without being caught? That is the big question whenever we are considering delving into or essentially bringing forth into our existence a porky pie. Now, this brings us on to an important thing. And the important thing is honesty always the best policy? Because we're talking a lot here about porky pies. So the question is honesty always the best policy? Should we ever resort to a porky pie? Should we even need to use the Porky Pie equation? So is honesty always the best possible? Is it always the best means of engaging with the world? Should we always be truthful with the world? Interesting question. Do we need the Porky Pie equation? Well, I would argue, the Bandido would argue, and it's just a theory. It's just my theory. It's an argument that I'm going to put forward. And I want you to think about it and then come to your own conclusion. So here's my argument. Here's my theory about should you always be honest? Should you always tell the truth? Should you use the Porky Pie equation that you should have been taught at school? Okay. Well, I would argue that whether or not you use the Porky Pie equation and whether or not you're going to be 100% honest or not is circumstantial. In other words, it depends on the circumstance. I would argue that whether you tell the truth or not depends on the circumstance. Let's give an example. Let's see if we can think of an example to try and help us understand what I'm getting at. Okay, so let's imagine we have a gentleman called, I don't know, Fierce Francie. Fierce Francie. Okay? So let's imagine we have this guy, Fierce Francie. Now, Fierce Francie, let's imagine he's a mafia boss from Mexico. You know, Fierce Francie from Mexico. He's a mafia boss out in Mexico. Let's roll with this. So Fierce Francie. So let's say, for some reason, I'm going to paint two different situations here, okay? So let's imagine Fierce Francie has flown from Mexico all the way over to Northern Ireland. And let's say Fierce Francie has located the Bandido. Let's say he has located the Bandido. The Northern Irish Bandido. Okay? And the reason why Fierce Francie has located the Northern Irish Bandido is because the Northern Irish Bandido has something tremendously valuable to our mafia boss, Fierce Francie. So here are the two situations. I'm going to go with situation number one. Circumstance number one. To help us understand, is honesty always the best policy? So let's imagine circumstance number one. Fierce Francie breaks into my house. Okay? And let's imagine I'm completely caught off guard. And let's imagine Fierce Francie bursts into the living room. And let's say he's carrying a pistol and a crossbow. So he's carrying a pistol and a crossbow. Who knows why? But those were his weapons of choice. And let's say Fierce Francie pins me up against the wall. I'm only, 68 kg. Let's say Fierce Francie is 102 kg. He's a big man. 6 foot 2. Fierce Francie, 102 kg. I'm a whippet compared to him. So let's say he pins me up against the wall and he holds the pistol to my head. And Fierce Francie says, "You, Mr. Northern Irish Bandido, have something of tremendous value that I have came the whole way from Mexico in order to take from you." And let's say the thing that Fierce Francie, the really valuable thing that Fierce Francie wants from the Northern Irish Bandido, are his stash of rice cakes. So let's say Fierce Francie cannot get a hold of rice cakes out in Mexico. Him and his whole mafia people really like rice cakes. So they've sent Fierce Francie over to find the Northern Irish Bandido because apparently, word on the street is, in Mexico, that the Northern Irish Bandido has a big stash of rice cakes. So here we have it. Situation number one. Fierce Francie, he breaks in. He pins me up against the wall, pistol to my head, and he threatens me. And he says, you need to show me your stash of rice cakes. Otherwise, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to take out my crossbow and I'm going to shoot it through your leg. And when it shoots through your leg, it's going to pin you up against the wall. So you'll be stuck up against the wall. and then I'm going to blow your brains out with my pistol. All right. Fierce Francie means business. So Fierce Francie has a crossbow, which he's going to shoot through my leg, pin me up against the wall, then he's going to blow my brains out with his pistol. Okay. So let's imagine in situation number 1, I am not armed. I have no weapon. We are in Northern Ireland. I have no weapon. I have no gun. I have no crossbow. I have no way to defend myself. Fierce Francie, 6'2", 102 kg, mafia boss, armed with 2 different weapons. So let's imagine I'm in this situation. I'm pinned up against the wall. In this particular circumstance, Fierce Francie has laid out his terms. If I do not show him my big stash of rice cakes, I am brown bread. Meaning, the Grim Reaper will be coming very soon. So in a circumstance like this, I will then resort to the Porky Pie equation. So the Porky Pie equation, I would be thinking, okay, should I try to deceive Fierce Francie? If I can deceive Fierce Francie, I may be able to make an escape from the house. However, that's the benefit, okay? So that's the benefit. If I can deceive, tell a Porky Pie, tell him where he thinks the stash is, but the stash isn't actually there, he gets careless and I manage to escape. Let's say that's the benefit. The cost in this particular circumstance, when I look at the Porky Pie equation, is Fierce Francie finds out that I have been deceitful. He finds out that I have been lying to him about my stash of rice cakes. Now we can imagine what's probably going to happen. Okay? Fierce Francie may figure out that there are other places in Northern Ireland to get rice cakes. Let's say he doesn't realise that at the moment. He thinks the stash is literally stuck in my house. It's hidden in my house. But let's say he maybe finds out afterwards, once he's blown my nut, or not blown my nuts off. Let's not go to the nuts. Blown my brains out. Fierce Francie isn't that fierce, I don't think. He'd just take my brains out. Anyway, so let's imagine Fierce Francie. I've been deceitful to Fierce Francie. He finds out that I've been deceitful. I don't like my odds. If Fierce Francie catches me lying in this circumstance where I am unarmed, nobody knows I'm in trouble, I'm in the house on my own, and Fierce Francie has a crossbow and a pistol. In other words, the cost of lying outweighs the potential benefit of the Porky Pie. So in this case, I look at my cost benefit and I say to myself, well, I'm unarmed, nobody knows I'm in trouble, and Fierce Francie means business. He wants my rice cakes. So as a result, I will look at that and then say, the cost is too great. If he finds out that I've been deceitful, this guy is a mafia boss, he's from Mexico, he means business, he'll probably just take me out and then hedge his bets elsewhere, he'll find his rice cakes. So in this particular circumstance, I would argue that 100% honesty may actually be the best play on my end. Because if I am honest with Fierce Francie, he may be guided towards my stash of rice cakes. I'll show him where the rice cakes are. He'll see hundreds of rice cakes. And I'll say to him, Fierce Francie, you take what you need. Whatever you need, I'm not going to try to make an escape. I'm not going to do anything. You just take whatever you need. Anything else in the house that you want, you take it, and then you're good to go. I'm not going to ring any place. I'm not going to do anything. I'll show you where the stash is. You take what you want. And then, if there's anything else in the house that you would like, please take it. And that's my end of the bargain. I'll be honest with you. Now, if I play it that way, if I am 100% honest with Fierce Francie, and I show him exactly where the rice cake supply is, and then I add a few extra things onto the deal. I say, take whatever you want. Rice cakes, you can have my popcorn as well, Francie. And if you can have, popcorn's easy, it's light, you can carry it home on the airplane, rice cakes, they are light as well, no problem. Have the popcorn too. So if I show that I have a honest and sincere streak in me. Fierce Francie may see the supply, take what he needs, and just leave me be. Get out of the country. He has his getaway car. He has everything ready. Gets out of the country. He flees. Once he's out of Northern Ireland, there's nothing can be done. Now, Fierce Francie may do that. Fierce Francie may turn around and still shoot me with his crossbow and blow my brains out. He still may do that, even if I show him, honestly, where the supply of rice cakes are. But I think when I would analyse the Porky Pie equation in that particular circumstance, I think the cost of Fierce Francie finding out that I've been deceitful far outweighs the potential benefit of me successfully carrying out the lie or the deception. It's too risky, in other words. The cost benefit looks too risky. If I don't pull this off, and I have a very fine margin of error, my perceived probability of success would be low. I wouldn't feel very confident. And Fierce Francie may pick up then on my lack of confidence and know that I'm lying. He'll know that I'm being deceitful. So in that circumstance number one, is it a good idea to be 100% honest? I would make the argument that it is a good play to be 100% honest, because at the end of the day, I'm unarmed. He has all the weapons. He has the element of surprise. He's caught me off guard. All I have to do is tell him where the stash of rice cakes are, throw in a few bags of popcorn. Fierce Francie's happy. Might he spare me my life? He has his getaway car there. All he has to do is get out of the country super quick. I won't call anybody because I would be too afraid that he may have other people watching the house. And if I call, or maybe he has the phones tapped, and then if he finds out that I've called the police whenever he leaves, he may get one of his assassins to take me out. So the chance of me telling the Porky Pie and reneging on the initial deal with Fierce Francie, there's too much risk. So in that circumstance, I will be 100% honest. I will be 100% honest. I will be truthful. 100%. Because when I look at the Porky Pie equation, the risk of being caught in the act of deceit is too great. Even though I may be able to escape if I can pull it off. My perceived probability of success is too low. I'm not confident enough. If I'm not confident enough in pulling off the deception, in pulling off the Porky Pie, then Fierce Francie will find out, and then I will incur all of his rage. Remember, he has a crossbow and a pistol, and I am unarmed. So that's circumstance number one. Perhaps we could argue 100% honesty is warranted in that particular situation. Now, let's have a look at situation number two. Circumstance number two. In circumstance number two, let's imagine the same thing happens. Fierce Francie breaks in. Okay? He pins me up against the wall. He has the crossbow. He has the pistol. He delivers the same threat. The same ultimatum. I want your rice cakes. But let's imagine in circumstance number two, in the cupboard where the stash of rice cakes are that Fierce Francie wants, let's imagine I've had a tip-off and I knew Fierce Francie was coming. So what I've now done is I've put my brother into the cupboard, into this big sort of storage space where the rice cakes are. I've put my brother in there, and he has a crossbow pointed right at the door where Fierce Francie thinks the rice cakes are stashed on their own. So let's imagine that circumstance. So Fierce Francie has me pinned up against the particular wall where I'm in trouble. So let's imagine. Let's actually change it. Let's make it even better. Let's imagine I've actually stationed my brother in a different storage space. So let's imagine on the right, I have the storage space with the rice cakes, and on the left, I have another storage space where my brother is positioned with his crossbow, pointing at the door. So in the first circumstance, I was honest. I said to Fierce Francie, look, I'll show you where the rice cake stash is. You take what you want, have a few bags of popcorn, off you go, I won't call the police. I would be 100% honest with Fierce Francie. But in this circumstance number two, let's imagine we have these two doors. We have the door on the right, the storage space on the right. That's where the rice cakes are stored. On the left, we have another storage space. That's where my brother is stationed with his crossbow. So in this circumstance, I look at the Porky Pie equation again. And I say to myself, okay, what is the potential benefit and upside to me being deceitful and sending, instead of sending Fierce Francie to the right-hand door, I send him to the left-hand door. Now I know that my brother is in there with a crossbow. So the potential upside here is, again, Fierce Francie meets his end, meets his maker, and then we escape with our lives. What's the potential cost? Well, how likely is it that Fierce Francie is going to find out that I have lied to him when he's harpooned by my brother? So when Fierce Francie has been harpooned and he's gagging for his last bit of air, what is the chance that he's going to know or be able to do anything about me double-crossing him? In other words, telling a Porky Pie. Very little. So in this case, what I may do is, while Fierce Francie has me pinned up against the wall, I may tell a Porky Pie, because my perceived probability of success, in other words, I'm far more confident in circumstance number 2 that I'm going to be able to get away with the deceit because I have somebody stationed in a different storage space with a weapon. So what do? Fierce Francie has me pinned up against the wall. I say, well, Fierce Francie, I'm going to be honest with you. I'll show you where the stash is. Now I've started the Porky Pie. So instead of sending Fierce Francie to the right-hand storage space, I send him to the left-hand storage space. Fierce Francie takes my word for it. He doesn't know where the rice cakes are stashed. So off he heads to the left-hand door, the storage space with the left-hand door. He opens the door, and then bang! Harpooned by the Bandido's brother. So now, what has happened? Fierce Francie has been harpooned. He's out of the game. My brother and I can make our escape. So notice in the second circumstance, what has happened? Well, I've changed the circumstances. Now, when I look at my probability of getting away with the Porky Pie, my perceived probability of success in getting away with the Porky Pie is much greater in the second circumstance because I have someone stationed in a different storage space with a weapon. So I believe that as long as Fierce Francie takes me at my word and thinks that the storage space over here is actually the location with the rice cakes, if he heads over there, he's getting harpooned by the crossbow. So in that case, the Porky Pie equation looks a little different. I think I can get away with the lie. I think I can make the escape. So, I would argue that whether or not we are going to be 100% honest, all of our politicians in story 1, the Irish presidential election, are there Porky Pies being told? Are there skeletons in certain people's closets that are being hidden? Or is Gavin Newsom being 100% honest when he says he just couldn't lie? Has he ever told a Porky Pie in his political career? What about Lord Mervyn King, former manager of Bank of England? What about Rachel Reeves when she's telling us about the £1 billion black hole? Do these people tell Porky Pies? They may well do. Do they use the Porky Pie equation? I would argue they do. And I would argue in general, when it comes to being 100% honest, when you are 100% honest, I would say one thing to close tonight's show. Being 100% honest and ignoring circumstances. So if you're just going to ignore circumstances, I've made the case that circumstances will dictate for me whether I be 100% honest and truthful or not. It depends on the circumstances. We must then analyze the Porky Pie equation in the context of the circumstances. I've given you two circumstances, two situations with Fierce Francie. Okay? One circumstance was I was unarmed and I was caught on the hop. I was caught by surprise. So in that circumstance, my perceived probability of pulling off the lie, my confidence was low. I didn't think I could do it. And so as a result, I wouldn't be able to sell the lie to Fierce Francie. He would probably sniff me out. So in that circumstance, I decide, okay, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to hedge my bets that if I show Fierce Francie honestly where the rice cakes are, he'll let me go. In circumstance 2, I have a tip-off. I have someone waiting in another storage space with a crossbow. And so as a result, I believe, when I look at the Porky Pie equation, that I'm going to be able to pull off the deceit. Okay, I believe that I'll be able to do it because I have someone else, in this case, that's armed. So if I can just direct Fierce Francie over here, I can get him harpooned. Now he's out of the game. Now we can escape. So if you are, though, one of these people, if you are one of these people who just cannot, you're too conscientious, you've got too much of a conscience, you can't bear to tell a Porky Pie. It just weighs too heavy on your mind. I would say this. This is all I would say. When you are 100% honest, you are predictable. An honest man is a predictable man. That is the trade-off, I would argue, to 100% honesty. If you are always 100% honest, independent of the circumstances, if you think it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, I must be honest, I must be truthful, I must always tell the truth, no matter what the circumstances are. If that is your mental model for life, then I would argue you are predictable. Think of it like this. If you have a flag, okay, and you stick that flag in the ground and you pour a whole bunch of concrete at the base of the flag, and that concrete solidifies, can you move your flag? No. Your flag will be forever in that location because you've essentially fixed it to the ground via concrete that has solidified. So you can't pull your flag out. You've put your flag in a location, you've put concrete around it, it's now fixed in that location. In other words, the location of your flag is predictable. When we get up the next morning, the flag will not have moved because you've put it into the ground. You've fixed it permanently into the ground. Even if you want to move the flag, you can't. So as a result, if you fix your flag permanently into the ground, it has a predictable location. It's never going to move. Now let's imagine somebody else. Let's imagine somebody puts their flag into the ground, but they don't add the concrete. And they have the ability to lift their flag and move it to another location. Is the location of that flag predictable? No, because one day it could be placed here in Donegal in County Tyrone, and the next day it could be not in this location and it could be in Derrygonnelly in County Fermanagh. In other words, how does this relate to what we're saying about honesty and Porky Pies? Well, if you are 100% honest, I would argue you are like a flag that is fixed into the ground with concrete at its base and it is permanently stuck there. Everybody knows where your flag is. And if everybody knows where your flag is, in other words, if that flag's location is predictable, people can then make plans if they want to, let's say, tamper with your flag. If people want to tamper or manipulate your flag, draw something on it, dye it a different colour, cut it, you can't do anything about it. In other words, the flag is primed for manipulation because its location is predictable. If you are like the other person whose flag is not in a fixed location, one day it's here, the next day it's here, the next day it's here. In other words, the location of that particular flag owner's flag is not predictable. Is it harder to manipulate that particular flag owner's flag? I would argue it is, because if you're thinking, yes, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up and I'm going to cut his flag, but you get up tomorrow morning and the flag isn't there, you can't cut the flag. In other words, this is an analogy for when you are deciding to be 100% truthful or not 100% truthful, I would argue you want to be adaptable to the circumstances. If there's a storm coming in, I want to be able to take my flag out of its location and put it somewhere where there isn't a storm. Because if the storm comes in, it may break the shaft or the whatever you call it, the part that holds the flag up, the plastic whatever, the pole of the flag, the storm may break it. But if it's fixed in the ground, it's in a predictable location. There's nothing can be done. The storm's going to come in and physically manipulate that flag. If you are adaptable to circumstances, in other words, if you assess the Porky Pie equation for each individual circumstance, you will then be able to better assess by running a cost-benefit analysis in the moment according to the circumstances as to whether you should keep your flag in that location or move it somewhere where it's going to be more advantageous for the flag and its safety. I would argue the same thing. We should have the same mental model when it comes to honesty and porky pies. Should you always tell the truth? Should you always tell porky pies? The answer depends on the circumstances. Just like our example with Fierce Francie, just like our example with our flag and there's a storm coming in. So when we see people, such as in our episode on Tuesday, our Tuesday upload, Best Bits compilation, we have the Irish presidential election, we have Gavin Newsom, who's the Democratic Governor of California. He's going to try to run for perhaps presidential office in the United States in 2028. We've got Rachel Reeves, we've got Lord Mervyn King. All these people are involved in politics. Do they tell porky pies? Perhaps they do. But what can we learn? Well, what we can learn is, we can learn about the porky pie equation. And we can perhaps learn that it is neither right to tell 100% the truth, nor is it right to tell 100% lies. The truth or the lie and the degree to which you tell the truth or the lie will be dependent on the circumstance in which you find yourself. And when you find yourself in a particular circumstance, what do? You go to the porky pie equation. All right. So, that is all for tonight, folks. I hope that was useful. I will say again, if you like the video, if you like the live stream, then leave a like. I didn't even check the chat. Let me see. See, the engine got up and going again. Let's see. Who do we have in the chat? We have Quizzed in the chat. I see a couple of comments. Okay. So comment number 1 from Quizzed. It says, it's a brave man who comes between Bandido and his rice cakes. Indeed, that is true. Quiz knows me too well. It's a brave man who comes between Bandido and his rice cakes. You know, if Francie is fierce enough, we have to resort to the porky pie equation. So even though I love my rice cakes, Quizzed is correct. I do love my rice cakes. However, if Fierce Francie is looking particularly ferocious on that evening, and the porky pie equation tells me that the risk associated with the deception is too great, and my perceived probability of success of pulling off the deception is too low, in other words, I'm not confident enough, then the rice cakes have got to go. They got to go. A sad day indeed. It would be a sad day when I sacrifice the rice cakes. But in that circumstance, the porky pie equation dictates. Perhaps it's better to be 100% honest with Fierce Francie when he's in such a foul mood. Now, comment number 2. Again, from Quizzed. You not dressing up for tonight, El Bandido. Simple thing here, folks. I'm going to answer Quizzed. His question is interesting, but it has a simple answer. The Bandido likes to keep things simple when it comes to his dress code. Sunglasses, red bandana, black tank top, black troopers, and a chain. Keeps my life simple. Somebody might argue I'm already dressed up tonight. Somebody may say I wore my Halloween costume all year round. Maybe that's the joke. Maybe I'm perfectly dressed for Halloween. Who knows? But I'm going to keep it the same. I'm going to be consistent. So it's the bandana, the aviator shades, the chain, the black tank, and the black troopers. So there'll be no dressing up tonight, Queest. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to keep it consistent here on Bandido Talks. Just as I say that, I let the hair flow tonight. I haven't got it tied up. Where's the consistency, says Queest. Anyway, those are all of our comments that we have for tonight. I want to thank Queest for getting into the comments, getting into the chat. It's always good to have some questions, have some interaction. That's good. And with that, as I say, feel free to like the video, to like the stream, get down into the comments section whenever the stream is posted, and of course, feel free to follow Bandido Talks. There'll be plenty of content coming. Feel free to come back tomorrow evening. We will be here again, 7 p.m. on YouTube, live, for some news on the tube. So that's news on the tube tomorrow evening here on YouTube, 7 p.m. Irish time. I hope to see you then, folks. Enjoy Halloween. That's enough from the Bandido for tonight. I'm heading straight over to Rumble. I've got a live stream over there at 8 p.m. So we're going to get into some Ramble on Rumble at 8 p.m. over on Rumble. Feel free to join me over there. If you're not heading over to Rumble, I hope to catch you tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Enjoy your Halloween celebrations. And all being well, we shall renew our discussion tomorrow evening. Folks, enjoy your evening. I shall get chatting to you all very soon.